famous historical hotel. We did a lot of weddings at that church. We did 360 weddings a year at that church. Had to have a note card for the weddings because with that many, you would mess up their name. I learned to say down there in the midst of South Florida, La bendición y paz de Dios nuestro Creador y del Señor Cristo esté con ustedes. But it was a wonderful church, filled with wonderful people. One of the first things that happened to me down there was I was asked to become a member of the Kiwanis Club. And I went to the Kiwanis Club. There were quite a few of our members that were part of the Kiwanis Club. And I'll never forget the first meeting when I was introduced as the newest member of the Kiwanis Club. I remember the speaker said we have the new pastor from Coral Gables Congregational Church here as a member of our Kiwanis Club. And there's a wonderful program that day that we scheduled. It was a fancy financial investor from Miami. And that financial manager took quick note of the fact that in the midst of all these bankers and lawyers and professionals, there was a preacher. So she introduced her speech by reading from the parable of the talents in Matthew, noting that you also could find that in the book of Luke, if you were to choose. Now, after she read from the parable of the talents, she took out what looked like a dollar bill. She said, "Have you seen this bill?" And she walked from the podium out to the audience. It says on this bill that this is a $1 million bill. And she asked, "Is it real?" That answered her own question. No, there is no such thing as a $1 million bill. Now she said, "I want to switch topics for a moment. I want to talk about the parable of the talents." And at that moment, I felt like I should be going into her office and talk about an investment strategy. But she began to talk about the parable of the talents. And she said, this is not about skills and abilities. We're talking about real money. That's what a talent is. One of my church members who was sitting next to me said, "Is that true? Talents are money?" "Yes," I replied, "but only in one sense." The speaker continued, "And there's something else you might not know. A talent is worth a lot of money. But just like $1 million bill, there's no such thing as a talent coin. It's a unit of measure, the largest in the time of Jesus. One talent is worth 6,000 denarii, and one denarius pays for a day's work. You do the math. That's over $1 million. Several people in the audience said, "Really? Really? Is that true?" And to those that were seated by me, I said, basically, she's right. It is $1 million. But the story in this parable is not about the money. The speaker went on. She loved the fact, I think, that my face was getting redder and that I was having more conversations with people around me. She said, "My friends, $1 million won't last long after retirement. Spread over 20 years, you won't be taking any cruises, and you won't have that extra money for your grandkid going to college." She had a dramatic pause in her presentation and then walked out to me. Right in front of me she stood. She was coming for the kill. I knew it. She pointed at me and she said, "Now this preacher knows. He knows the problem. The one talent man did not invest." Can you see where this is going? He hid it under a mattress. Right, preacher? Well, yeah, I guess a whole could be the same as mattress. And then I added, of course, it's a symbolic term. And she didn't hear a word of that. She just turned and went back and said this. The preacher knows the one talent man had $1 million and he didn't invest. The parable of the talents is about investment strategy. And for those who invest wisely, that means security. There is nothing greater than security, she said. Whether it be in heaven or on earth, it applies to all of us. Now, needless to say, she didn't give me time to rebut what she said. I would have started with, seek ye first the kingdom of God, or love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. I didn't get that chance. Now, there is something about security in this parable, because each of the slaves were told, enter into the joy of your master. All of us would like to have our lives synced with God's sense of joy and peace. Wouldn't we all like to have our plates unloaded from those things that trouble us, cause us pain on the journey? So there is a little bit about security here, but not an investment strategy. Let me tell you what this parable is about. Number one, we have to struggle to focus our relationship with God on trusting God. You know what a lot of churches teach? You better fear God, because God's going to come and get you. If you step away from God's path, you're going to be punished substantially. It's not a relationship of trust and understanding. It's a relationship of fear and foreboding. And the church has fed right into that. How many times have different denominations of the church taught that if you do this, you're going straight to? I would say that this morning. But there's a dire circumstance if you do this. Instead of focusing on God's forgiveness and God's compassion in the midst of our troubles, in the midst of those things we have done without consideration of others, things that have been destructive to our own lives. Our relationship with God must be based on an understanding of trust. We trust God, even when, I think I've told several of you this before. The senior minister prior to our ministry in Hartford, Connecticut, lost 2 sons to cystic fibrosis. 2 of them, one at 19, one at 21. And he used to always say, which absolutely flabbergasted me, he said, even in our pain and our tears, we have this assurance that all things ultimately work for good for those who love the Lord. That's hard when we've been through pain. It's hard when we've lost a spouse. It's hard when we've lost a relationship, when we've lost a business, to say all things work for good for those who love the Lord. But it is symbolic of a trusting relationship with God. Now there's a second part to this. A trusting relationship with God, and like the children, we are being encouraged here, whether we have 5 talents or 2 talents or 1, to be the best at that talent that we possibly can be. Maybe that's the best attorney. Maybe that's the best farmer. Maybe that's the best musician. Or maybe it's being the best at caregiving for those in my community who hurt. Maybe it's being the best at accumulating food for those who are hungry. Maybe, like I said to that little girl seated right next to me, maybe your smile talent that will change the world around you. You've probably seen that program on TV. Got Talent? And then there's America's Got Talent. United Kingdom's Got Talent. Now there's Australia's Got Talent. Hey, Eric, Lisa, Terry, Rick, you got talent. Identify the gifts that you've been entrusted. And to the best of those gifts you possibly can be. Trust in God and be the best that you can be. Ministering to you all in Christ's name. Amen.